In a remote village surrounded by lush green hills and a crystal-clear river, there lived a farmer named Edward. Every day, Edward worked tirelessly on his farm, planting rice, tending to his small garden, and caring for a few chickens. His life was simple, but deep within, Edward felt something was missing. Often, he would sit under a large tree by the edge of his field, gazing at the distant mountains and wondering, is this all life has to offer? Could true happiness lie beyond those mountains, perhaps in the bustling city that travelers often speak about? One morning, while selling his harvest at the local market, Edward overheard a merchant talking about a wealthy man named Mr. Johnson who lived in a neighboring city. Mr. Johnson was famous for his immense wealth, a grand mansion, vast estates, and thriving businesses. Many admired him as the epitome of success and happiness. Edward began to ponder his own life. He felt envious of Mr. Johnson. Perhaps if I were as rich as him, I would be truly happy. My life would have more meaning, he thought. With newfound determination, Edward decided to leave his village and travel to the city, hoping to learn the secret to happiness from Mr. Johnson. After a long and arduous journey, Edward finally arrived in the bustling city. He marveled at the crowded streets, magnificent buildings, and vibrant energy of the place. After asking around, Edward managed to secure a job as a laborer in one of Mr. Johnson's warehouses. Over the course of a year, Edward observed Mr. Johnson's life closely. At first, he was dazzled by the man's luxurious lifestyle, grand parties, and influential acquaintances. However, as time went by, Edward began to notice things he had not expected. Mr. Johnson often appeared restless, constantly preoccupied with his business dealings. Despite his wealth, he rarely seemed to enjoy his life. He was frequently irritable, stressed, and spent little time with his family. Edward grew confused. If this is what happiness looks like, why does Mr. Johnson seem so uneasy? He wondered. After a year of working in the city, Edward decided to return to his village. He realized that the answers he sought might not be in the city after all. However, upon reaching his village, Edward was disheartened to find his farm overgrown with weeds. His small house appeared more run down than before, and his chickens had died during his absence. Edward felt a wave of disappointment. His quest for happiness seemed to have brought him nothing but more challenges. Yet, he refused to give up. With determination, he began clearing the weeds, tilling the soil, and planting new seeds. As Edward toiled under the sun, several of his neighbors came to help him. They brought tools, seeds, and food, working alongside him. They laughed, shared stories, and supported each other through the hard labor. Despite the exhaustion, Edward felt a warmth in his heart that he hadn't felt in a long time. As the months passed, Edward's farm began to thrive again. The harvest that year wasn't bountiful, but it was enough to sustain him. Sitting under the large tree by the edge of his field, Edward gazed at his farm and felt something different. Edward began to realize that happiness wasn't about having more, but about appreciating what he already had. He reflected on his time in the city, where he had seen Mr. Johnson's wealth, but also his constant unease. He also remembered the generosity of his neighbors, who had selflessly helped him when he needed it most. Edward started to live his life with a new perspective. He worked on his farm with mindfulness, enjoying every step of planting and harvesting. He spent more time with his neighbors, shared meals, and listened to the laughter of children playing in the village. He discovered that true happiness lay in the simple things: the warmth of the morning sun, the sound of birds chirping, and the connections he had with the people around him. Edward no longer looked at the distant mountains with longing. He had found the answers he had been searching for. Happiness was not a treasure hidden far away, but something that could be cultivated in his heart through gratitude, simplicity, and meaningful relationships. In that quiet village, under the shade of the large tree by his field, Edward finally felt truly happy.